Welcome back to Sketchy Talk. This is our first episode of 2023. And today I have my friends Tony Moorman and Oliver Meinerding joining us. They are an illustrator and filmmaking team who recently did their own children's book, and I will read their bios here. Tony Moorman has been writing and making short stories, films, and art documentaries for the last 20 years. Storytelling is a wonderful art form, and to be able to share that art is a wonderful gift of expression. Tony has been obsessed with vampire films, dark comics, and fantasy. Tony directed Making It and C.F. Payne, an American Illustrator. Oliver Meinerding has been a professional graphic designer and illustrator for 15 years. His work has been seen in Imagine FX and Spectrum Fantastic Art Annual, and he has done work for tabletop gaming companies, editorial publications, as well as global brands such as Old Spice, Charmin, Captain Morgan, among others. He has a passion for classical illustration and creates both traditionally and digitally. So welcome to the show.
Hi, Christina. Thank you for having us.
Thanks for having us.
Yes, I'm really glad you're here. And so let's start a little bit. I know both of you said we were talking before the show and you both said that you sketch. I know, Oliver, you post sketches all the time, so you seem to have a fairly robust practice. And Tony, you said you have done some storyboarding. So maybe talk a little bit about if you keep a sketchbook and what motivates you.
I'll go first.
You want me to go first? All right.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I've always been, sketching is actually kind of my favorite thing. I like making final work as much as I can, but my heart is really in sort of the process work. And Tony knows the art that I actually buy, it's all sketch work. Finals are cool, but I like the development of the idea. And so for myself too, it's really the fun part to explore just whatever I'm thinking about at the moment. And so I've always kept a sketchbook. I keep a pocket-sized one with me almost all the time, even if it's maybe for note-taking or writing down an idea. I love observational drawing. I love imaginative drawing. So I try to just keep it with me all the time. I'm sure you're familiar, Christina, with Draw Your Drink.
Yes.
No matter what, just to keep you drawing, just wherever you're at. If you got a drink, just draw that. Like, it just keeps the pen and the pencil moving. So I'm a sketchbook fanatic. Now I have been slowly transitioning to doing even a lot of my sketching on my iPad. I'm a father of 3, got a full-time job. So a lot of the times after work, if it's the right season, we're going outside to the patio, and it's so easy to just grab the iPad and just start on that. And it's just so convenient and portable. I have been embracing a lot more of that. So my sketchbook itself in the past 6 months, notably, has kind of fallen off to the side of my desk and isn't getting a lot of love, but it's certainly where my heart is at, and I'll never fully give it up. I absolutely love it.
And Tony?
Yeah, obviously, having a sketchbook around is really helpful for me as well, mostly for note-taking, mostly for writing. But, with my collaboration with Oliver, like an example I can use is when we were creating Lost Fang together, which is our new children's book we're working on. And I had an idea for like a page for me to just do a quick doodle, not care about it being good at all, and be able to, use that as a form of communication is really helpful, especially with an artist like Oliver, because then he can just take that concept. I mean, I have a really tiny sketch of Thomas saying, I want fangs. And I took a picture of it and I sent it to Oliver, and you get my 2-second doodle, and then you get his amazing splash page, finished drawing illustration. So in that sense, I think sketching, note-taking, having books around is always helpful and useful. And I encourage everyone to do that as well.
And I think, Tony, I don't know about, or Christina, you too, like my whole mindset around the sketchbook took a long time, I think, to mature to the right place where, I grew up, I was in college and stuff pre-Instagram, so it wasn't that bad, but I was still following artists like James Jean and everybody else, all the superstars, and their sketchbooks were these amazing drawings one after another. And so I had this kind of crazy ideal about what my sketchbook is supposed to be and how impressive it should be if somebody looks at it. And I think, it really took me until later in my years to realize that it's the thinking place and kind of the nastier, gnarlier, grittier it is. That's kind of the better mode for me. Some people's drawings, they can't help it. They're all beautiful all the time. Mine aren't. Mine are gnarly and gross and messy and crazy. So I've really been able to, in the later years here of my development, embrace that kind of just be free in it. And if it's bad, it's fine. If it's great, cool, snap it, post it on Instagram if you want. But like really just letting it be this place to just vomit out whatever you want. And that has been really a nice place to finally get to.
Yeah, it definitely is a place to express your ideas. That's what I use it for. There are people that use their sketchbooks almost for journaling and stuff, and there's nothing wrong with that. I mean, journaling, especially when you're traveling, but even day-to-day stuff. Some people put their grocery lists in their sketchbooks. And a lot of times, like if I'm working on my webcomic or if I'm working on a book cover, I'll doodle in my sketchbook and I carry a small one too. I mean, I like sketching on the iPad. Since I got my Cintiq, I love drawing on it so much. I now mostly use my iPad to play board games.
Nice. That's awesome.
So I don't use it that much to sketch in. I usually sketch in my sketchbook. I don't know why. Maybe it's because I do work digitally so much on children's books and stuff that I like to work and experiment with different materials and that sort of thing. But it definitely is a place to encourage ideas. As a matter of fact, that's actually a big thing I push for my students, especially with all the debate about AI and stuff like that. I am not worried about AI taking illustrators' jobs. And this is why I try to teach illustrators that it's not about the rendering. I agree with you, Oliver. It's all about the idea. And so I try to get the students, and that's why, in my book on sketching, I have a lot of timed exercises. Speaking of times, my alarm just went off, but that's for the cat pill. But it's funny, the alarm went off when I talked about timed sketches. I couldn't have planned that better, but a lot of times I'll make my students do like 5-minute sketches and 2-minute sketches because, and the thing that's really amazing about it is that a lot of times those sketches they do are more creative and interesting than if I give them 2 days to do sketches. If I say, go sketch a book cover and do some thumbnails, when I get it back, what I get back is less good than a lot of times what they sketch in those 5-minute sketch sessions. And I think it's because they're forced kind of to think on their feet and draw fast, but you're going to be more paid for your ideas than how you render them.
Right.
A lot of people draw similar things, but what makes them different is their personal take on it.
Yeah, right.
And
well, and I think just to piggyback on that a little bit, I think some of that, I'm more like you about it, Tony. I don't know exactly where you stand on the whole AI thing as far as where it sits on like image making, but I feel like I'm not as worried about it either. I mean, maybe that's because I'm not in an industry that seems like low hanging fruit for it. AI made logos are generally just really bad. So it's getting, I think Midjourney in particular is getting good at a particular look where if you've got the wrong art director who doesn't understand what you're talking about and does think it's just about the look coolness of it, it could undermine a couple people's roles if the person in charge doesn't understand what they're getting out of that artist, and sees them as replaceable because it's just about the aesthetic. But I'm not as worried about it either myself, at least not yet. I mean, I see it being the future kind of everything, but I think we're a ways away from that.
I think that a lot of it, and I mean, and this is not even discussing the moral implications of stealing people's artwork. I don't agree with that. And I think that's wrong.
Right. Yeah.
And I'm just talking about the fear that they will replace artists. For one thing, the sketching practice is not about the finished piece. It's about the practice of sketching and generating ideas. I mean, I've said before, the reason why I sketch is because it makes me still love drawing. If I didn't sketch at all, I would get really frustrated with all the finished work I have to do.
Right. Yeah, that's a good point.
And you probably feel the same way.
Yeah. Oh, no, totally. And I mean, I'm sure I have to imagine you felt this way, and I feel it all the time. And I see other illustrators talk about it all the time, is the final loses something from the sketch. Even some of the best fantasy illustrators I see mention that. They're like, God, my final, it always tightens up a little bit, because in the sketch, you've got all these wonderful
There's something magical.
Yeah, there's this idea, your mind's filling in a couple of things, and then you got to really paint that hand, and you got to figure out every knuckle and do all the, It's like in the drawing, it's just this mark that you
It's just a
interpret.
scribble.
Yeah, and it's like there's some magic to that, and it, not that the final can't still be a draw dropper, but when you see the sketch, at least to me, and I think a lot of times the artists themselves feel like it lost a little bit of something in the final.
And you're about to illustrate is this your first children's book that you're illustrating?
It is, yeah. So I was in a funky spot motivation wise. God, when was that, Tony, that I called you about this book?
It was at least 3 years ago, at least.
It was right before the pandemic. Yeah,
right.
It was right before 2020, because I was going to have a show somewhere and it fell through because of everything kicking off.
That's right.
And I was like, this is just not. I don't know what to do next. And being fairly self-motivated, I do better if I'm accountable to somebody else. And I was like, Tony, I know you got 100 million ideas. You're a great writer. Give me something. Let's work on something together. Yeah, I know he had some children's book ideas. I was like, let's get cranking on one of these things. And he talked over a few ideas, and yeah, this is my first one. But I know Tony's got other ideas already kind of cooking.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, do you have it all sketched out? You've sketched out the whole thing.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Like to Tony's point earlier, like we did the thumbnails, and we've had a really collaborative process. But I think, and I'll let Tony speak to this too, but I think part of us were looking for a project where we got to kind of just do what we wanted. I know Tony's a great writer. I think he has faith in me as an illustrator, and we both have ideas for each other, but we've done enough jobs where everybody's telling us to fix the thing that we did.
Yeah,
that we thought was good. It's like, well, yeah, but now make it this. It's like, okay, well, that's what you're paying me for. But Tony and I were talking about, like, Tony, let me mostly draw images I'm excited about and that I want to do. And we'll thumbnail them and we'll look them over and make sure that it's telling the story you want, because I want Tony to be just as excited about this book as me.
Oh, yeah.
And he shared some writing. So in that regard, we've tried to be cheerleaders for each other and idea contributors, but not huge changes for each other. I mean, Tony, do you feel like that's accurate?
Yeah. The interesting thing about Lost Fang and us collaborating together, and you might find this interesting, Christina, was, I think, Oliver, correct me if I'm wrong, but you wanted like an exercise of taking a full-fledged character and having that character go through a story. So it was like having a character that you've created through different worlds that has a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's sort of what sparked our collaboration. I think you first looked at it as like, this would be a great exercise to flex my skills as an artist, as an illustrator. And I was like, you were like, hey, pitch me 5 ideas. So, pitching Oliver those 5 ideas, him picking the one that resonated with him the most, and him and I collaborating on the writing and the thumbnails and the sketching. It's been a great process, And as far as I mean, Oliver had everything pretty much mapped out from the beginning. So when we decided to launch the book, we had a really good place to go, and really nothing's changed since then, which has been a blessing creatively, because it keeps us both motivated, and both of us either have jobs we have to do. So it's nice that and making the book is still fun, which is the best part about it.
Yeah,
well, that's cool.
Yeah.
And one thing I was going to talk about, my favorite part of a book project is the sketching part of it. And then that's why I was saying you're about to go through that marathon of finishing the artwork, because you've done these sketches and you like them, and now you have to like define everything.
Yeah, right.
And that's where it gets dicey, because and I often revisit the sketches and I'll say, oh my gosh, it's totally lost something from what the sketch had. And that's the hardest part, I think, between coming up with the idea and finishing it, is because you are taking it to that finished level where you have to define everything.
Right. Well, that's what I think too. It was exciting that, like I talked about before, it's like everything I do is completing somebody else's vision for art directors, and it's a blessing to have those assignments. But I think of Mike Mignola talking about Hellboy. He's like, I just wanted, whether I did one Hellboy or not, I wanted to have a thing that was mine. Exactly. I've heard him say that. It's like, I just wanted to have this thing I did. And being friends with Tony, I was like, well, I can share that experience with one person who's not going to just, it's not just Tony's. I'm not just a hired illustrator. It's like, we're a partnership in this. But it's still this thing, like, once it's done, we will have this one thing that is the way we wanted it to be, without somebody else telling us the way they thought it should be. And that was really what the satisfaction that I was looking for. And there is still some work ahead. We're cracking through it, but I'm looking forward to that being the satisfaction at the end, that this is the thing, and it's the way we wanted. It's the size we wanted. It's the cover we wanted. Looking forward to that feeling.
Also, I'm kind of wanting to do, I mean, I'm loaded up with a lot of client work too, but I'm wanting to do more and more stuff that's just self-directed as well. And that's sort of the advantage of being able to kickstart something, is to at least fund these things. I mean, it funds them just enough. Obviously, you want to sell books afterwards, but it funds it enough to get it off the ground.
Right. Yep,
and
exactly.
make it a nice product, as opposed to just like taking a loan out for the amount of money or whatever.
Right. Well, I've seen too many projects, and Tony and I have talked about this too, too many projects where it's an illustrator I really admire, and I see the final product. I'm like, okay, great illustrations. Book layout is dog's dinner. It's not good at all. The treatment of the work is not, I feel such excitement and passion for some of this imagery. And then I see the book. I'm like, how did you, they gave it to some designer who doesn't feel the way I do about the images. It's like, give me the book. Not to say I will do the single best job, but that was a part of this that was exciting too. It was like, I get to take my images, Tony's writing, and put it together the way that we think it should look. If not some, $20 an hour designer putting the book together, because it's like you said, it's the final product. It's the whole package. So I've seen that not to put my images on the same par as some of the people I'm talking about, but I've seen those illustrations kind of disrespected by the design enough that I didn't want to do that with our thing,
Although, conversely, and I had this discussion, actually, shout out to Ryan Clater, who's been on this podcast before, and he is a educator. He teaches comics in Michigan and just did a book that came out a couple months ago. And we were talking about why use a designer. And I actually, for this book, used a designer because my strength is not graphic design. And I have not done a lot of book layout. I have done a lot of book illustration, but I have not done a lot of where you sit down and InDesign and export files and stuff.
Right.
And so I actually hired a designer that used to work in F&W that does art books.
Oh, great. Well, there you go.
I kind of felt like it was, and that's one thing that Kickstarter enabled me to do, because the others, if you're a good designer, you have a lot of experience doing design and you're really good at design. Conversely, I have seen a lot of art books on the other side of the coin where they did the design themselves and had no idea what they were doing. And it looks terrible. And so you have to decide, am I competent enough to do surgery on myself or not? There is sort of some people are able to do that and some people aren't, and know your strengths and weaknesses before you get involved in a project.
That's a fantastic point, because part of that is that my career job as a designer has required so much in design, and again, it's still art. Some people are going to like it, some people aren't, but hopefully the design principles come through. If it's not your thing, that's fine, but hopefully it's not terrible. But I have enough design experience and in InDesign and doing layouts for catalogs and all kinds of things to feel really confident that I can put this whole thing together in a way that is, feels complementary text and imagery wise. That is not for everybody, because like you said, you see some designers or illustrators too at conventions. It's like, I can tell you did your own table banner because it does not look very good. Stuff like that. There is definitely, please hire designers. I'm one of them. I hire designers, but it's been nice to handle it myself and know that we can control all those factors.
It definitely, we were kind of discussing this a little bit about people that go into illustration as a profession. And I was saying, I think that you should never have an exclusive illustration degree. I think it's good to have design also. I think any kind of thing. Even Tony with being a filmmaker, I think having a sensitivity towards design is extremely important.
Yeah, 100%. This might be shocking to you, but we relied on Oliver to help design making it, and also CF Payne and American Illustrator. And I've always told Oliver this. I was like, dude, without design, like doing like low budget tier documentaries or independent films, your film just doesn't look professional. And we can hire a solid designer to craft a package around your art. It just elevates everything. It takes your little $2,000 film and makes it look like, like $1 million. So design is crucial. And I know I'll always owe Oliver lunch for the rest of my life. And he knows this. He's helped us out in so many ways with those documentaries, and I'll owe him forever. So yeah, design is really important for the package overall.
But I think too, and credit where it's due, there were plenty of other, designers and illustrators and things who helped on those projects too. But I did have a hand in that. Not responsible. I can't claim responsibility for all of it.
Well, making it was weird, right? Because making it was like Oliver designed it, Joel Knieven designed it, and then Brian Ewing designed it, and then I think Woody did a treatment on it. And we had like 3 or 4 miscellaneous posters and DVD covers. It was sort of a mess all over the place, which, I don't know if it was good or bad. There's a lot of cool art that was made for that documentary, which, I was excited about personally, but it definitely lost I'm just trying to critique myself a little bit, like an overall vision or an imagery that really was like a stamp for that film. Mm-hmm. So in that regards, it was probably over designed by multiple people throwing their hat in the rings. So, that's probably a good lesson, is to stick with one, mm-hmm. and use that as your marketing and your campaign for whatever it is, your comic, your book, your film. So yeah, that was a good lesson that we learned, but a lot of great art was made out of that experience.
But I think too, like you had mentioned, Christina, about the illustration and design. I think the pairing is super strong, and anymore, I have a buddy who started where I did, and instead of illustration, he did design, and now he's doing 3D and motion. I mean, he's just killing it. I don't know if he does any print design anymore, but he has broadened that skill set so much. But he can do print design. Again, not illustration, but he's doing 3D stuff and animation, and he's just killing it. And having that breadth of capabilities, I think now more than ever, I wish I had more. Instead of learning banjo, I probably should have learned to do some 3D. But like Tony, it wasn't it in making it. Was it Stu McKissick from CCAD who said, don't be an artist, or don't be an illustrator, don't be a designer, be a maker? Wasn't that Stu?
Yeah.
And that is good advice. That's good advice.
Just be a maker.
Yeah, his whole thing was you can't be one or two things. You need to be all these things if you're really going to make it as an artist. Just be a maker. Wear 10 hats. Unfortunately, was kind of his advice. Was you got to do it.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's so much of that now too, where it's like not everybody can do everything, and like to your point, Christina, hire a designer. If you don't have that skill set, go to somebody who does, and that's what's been so nice about this working with Tony is. I'm not grammatically, I can put a nice email together, but I'm not a very good creative writer, mm-hmm. and I don't know anything about doing film. Mm-hmm. So I could make a Kickstarter and I can make, images for a book. Tony's the guy with the words. Tony's the guy making the book trailer and the cool videos that really people want to see these days. Everything is gearing so much toward video for social media and everything. So it is nice to partner with somebody who can wear some of those hats for you. Mm-hmm. But I think, the more you can do, the more you can do yourself. It's just the more you can control everything and the quality of everything and the direct vision of everything. And I wish I could do more myself, but partnering with somebody who can has been a really nice boon.
Mm-hmm. And when you self-publish, I mean, you definitely have that control to execute your vision in a way that not necessarily. I mean, obviously they're going with a traditional publisher is a way to go, but obviously they have their own agenda as well, mm-hmm. and how they're going to promote it, and how there's a lot you don't have a say in, when you work with a traditional publisher. It's not bad or good. It's just sort of the way it is. And the way publishing, the way creative, like you said, being a maker is happening, is changing in general because mm-hmm. of technology. And I mean, even bigger than AI is the fact that now you can, digital printing and print on demand has been a huge game changer in general for writers. It is no longer, there's there are writers that have a huge fan base that now they're kind of like, I don't know if I want to go to a publisher because I'll make less money.
Right. Yeah. Well, right. Exactly. No, and you were kind enough too to help us, and we're grateful for it in our in our long, geez, I can't get out, in our lost Fang journey.
It's all her fault.
It's all Christina's fault. No, Christina was so helpful in consulting with us early on about, talking to publishers or not, and the pros and cons of that, because she has such deep experience with the publishing and the pros and cons of doing a Kickstarter. And you were certainly a supporter of the campaign itself. So not to derail us, but thank you for your help there. But it was insightful to talk to you about, the challenges that come with a publisher and some of those things that we were a little bit scared about if it were to go that route, losing a little bit of the vision. So, back to that again, it's just being able to control everything. But it sort of changes all that when you have to do it for somebody else.
Well, I suppose that's one thing that, oh, sorry, Tony, go on.
No, I was just gonna, mention how, we talked to Lauren Long, we talked to Sia Payne about publishing, and it was great when I think we talked to you first. It was great that you were there with just another avenue, with an idea of doing self-publishing, an avenue of tackling Kickstarter so we can make our book, because everyone else was telling us this is just the way you have to do it to get published. And that road is a long road. We spent over a year and a half sending stuff out, getting no responses, or we got one no. And I think the other response we got was a hybrid publishing deal, which made no sense dollars wise for us. So we kept going back to, well, Christina said this. Christina said that. Maybe we should look into it. And then it was like Oliver was like, hey man, I don't want to sit on this and just maybe start another idea, or maybe, keep sending stuff out to other publishers, trying to, getting an agent and all that stuff. So it was, again, we're really thankful to have talked to you first about this, and also just giving us a different way to approach his business of how to create a book. It was super helpful, and I'm glad we kind of circled back, around to it and actually followed through with, through your help and through Oliver's motivation on really saying, hey dude, let's do it. Let's do it this way. And I was like, all right, cool. I'm on board. So.
Well, it's part of it is the changing world, like bookstores. There's not as many as there are some, not nearly as most people order stuff online these days. It's the whole way people reach their consumer base has totally changed. Now publishers, I think their biggest, and this is a whole separate discussion beyond sketching, their biggest base has been libraries and schools, and a lot of that funding is getting cut and changing, and there's book bans, and there's a lot of political stuff right now that's potentially harming what publishers are putting out there. And then a lot of publishers, the big 5 publishers, have downsized significantly. They're merging together, and what has happened is that a lot of them have become agents. So they said even agents now are making a huge slush pile for publishers, because publishers don't have anyone to read this stuff and publish it because of consolidation and all of that sort of thing. And so I think what's happened is you're seeing like this huge shift of where publishing dollars are going and how people get published product and that sort of thing. It's sorting out a little bit, but like everything, the traditional, you could compare like podcasting, for example, like we're recording here. There was no way to record stuff as a filmmaker, as you know, Tony. There was no way to make films and movies 10 years ago like this. And now you can stream stuff, you can film stuff. It's totally probably changed filmmaking too.
Yeah, 100%. It's technology in regards of, like we were talking about before, with AI and the iPad. Video cameras are very accessible. Editing software is extremely accessible now. The whole idea behind YouTube is an amazing thing. It's something that will teach you things visually really, really quickly and really, really fast. It doesn't mean that you hone in that skill as a craftsman, but you can just get there so much faster than what it was 10, 15, 20 years ago. I mean, shooting on video 20 years ago was a nightmare. You actually had to shape the light. You had to make sure skin tones looked decent. Now, pretty much, you can buy any. When people ask me, what camera should I buy any camera. Just buy any. They're all good. buy the newest iPhone. It's fantastic. There's no reason why you need to buy a 30,000 camera or 100,000 camera. They're all great. So yeah, to your point, it's just the technology is there. It's accessible, and you just got to put in the time to get good, right?
Exactly. And that's where I think it's going to end up being a vision where we're talking about circling back to sketching and your own vision. I think that's where makers are going to excel, is their ideas. It's not how well it's rendered. It's are these ideas good and compelling and interesting? Whether it's a book, whether it's a movie, whatever it is, it's the idea that's at the center. And so to me, like art education, the most important thing for illustrators and designers is to have good ideas and execute interesting ideas and look at things differently. And I know that's not exactly the way a lot of education is positioned right now, but I think it's possibly the most important. I don't know how you all feel about that.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's one of those things where I think sometimes it's hard for me sometimes to frame things as the product graphic designer or the illustrator, the artist kind of guy. The two mindsets, I feel like, as far as the career goes, can be very different. Where, some days as the designer, I feel like my job is to be very creative. A lot of days it's not. A lot of days it's not very creative. And those are the days where you're like, oh, geez, I don't want to be just a cog in the wheel. I don't want to be replaceable, but everybody can make a web banner for Facebook. Everybody, some days you're just making the crap that just has to be made, and you're churning it out, and you still have to use your design skills to try to make it look good. But I mean, there are days where it's not the most creative, and there are a lot of those days. So, but then what I look at are the chances where, and again, I work at a small company now, but I have big agency experience. It's like, here's the project, or here's round one. Here's round one. That's where you get to just go bananas. You got to follow the brief, but show everybody what you can do. And the client's going to tell you not to, and they're going to tell you to do all these other things. But that's the one where everybody goes, damn, like that kicked ass. Like, he really nailed it. He's really good. Round one of any project where you get to just do concepts and show everybody what you can do. I love taking advantage of that opportunity. Or where there is a job where it's like, hey, yeah, finish your web ads, but then we got to kick off this, bourbon bottle. Okay, well, now it's the time to really kind of be put the ideas to paper and figure it out. So I feel like there's a give and take with the graphic design stuff. It's not every day you're the idea guy, but you still have to be a good team player and all that kind of thing. It's a little bit more political with that kind of thing, but there's like a social aspect to it. Whereas with the illustration, a lot of the times I am still fulfilling a client's request, but I do the version they're asking for, and then I do what I think they should do and try to push their thinking, because sometimes they don't know what it is they want, or they think they know, but then they see, well, he's also thinking about this with us. He's being a team player. He's being a collaborator. So I think that's where you can separate yourself from the other people who are maybe just doing the job, and being somebody who is a real partner with an agency or a client as an illustrator is showing them your thinking too, and trying to make it the best it can be by maybe not just doing exactly what they asked for.
That's a really good point. And I'm going to actually change the subject here right now, because I want to talk a little bit about how did you all get involved working together? Because you've had kind of a long working relationship. What kind of walk us through how you started collaborating? Because did you start doing design? Like, how did you start working together?
So I think it was 2008, I guess. Reconnected with my buddy Woody Hinton, which the both of you know. He's an illustrator, an educator, and I reconnected with him. I actually went to high school with Woody. So I wanted to do a children's book back in 2008 called Wizard Marty Leaftree and His Amazing Maps. And I reconnected with Woodrow about that project. And he was already hanging out with Oliver, and Oliver was a former student of his. And they were already hanging out like once a month, once every couple months. And I kind of got invited to the inner circle. So that's where I met Oliver. And then I was sort of invited back, and we kind of became like, lunch buddies or whatever. So that was kind of where it kicked off. And through that friendship, Oliver and I just became closer as friends as the years went on, and projects kind of went through. I made a short film. The children's book I wanted to do with Woodrow got abandoned. And Christina, you're actually involved in this as well. I've told you a little bit about this, but what's funny is Oliver can kind of witness this. He can kind of he was there. But Woodrow said he was going to do the book, and he asked me how much I had for the book for him to do full illustrations, and I had $1,000, $1,000. And Woodrow said he would do it, and then he decided that he wasn't going to do it. And he mentioned you, Christina. He said Christina might be available to do it. It's like 2008, 2009. And I can't remember exactly if we actually had an exchange. Like there may have been an email exchange, but at some point, the way I remember it, it could be wrong. But you were too busy for $1,000, and you're like, thanks, but no thanks. So that project, I kind of remember it happening that way. I was like, all right, cool, that's fine, I understand. And then Woodrow convinced me to do a film because I really wanted to make a short film called No More Blood, which is an action revenge flick. So he's like, why don't you take your $1,000 invested in a short film if that's what you really want to do? Because I was kind of like going back and forth. So that's that story. So that book has never been finished, but Woody and I have reconnected over the last 10 years, and he's actually dipped his toe in it multiple times. So that book has died. It's killed itself like 10 times. Oliver knows this. So,
but it's still hanging around.
It's still hanging around. There are beautiful thumbnails for that book. Beautiful thumbnails. Woody over-designed those thumbnails like anyone you'd ever. I mean, they're ridiculous.
Wow.
I mean, there's so much. He spent so much time and energy, and I think he finished 2 painting, like maybe a painting and a half. Like he inked them and he colored them in Photoshop. So it definitely had a heartbeat, but then it was killed. You never know; it might return from the dead once again. But over that 10-year period, Oliver and I just kept hanging out, and there were times Woodrow would make it, which was a nice sign because it proved that Oliver and I were like real buddies. So it wasn't just friends through associations through Woodrow. And then obviously Woodrow was a co-creator behind making it, co-creator behind Sea of Payne, and we have tricked Oliver into helping us with all the design work with all that stuff. So we've been collaborating for really a long time. It's just been through Woodrow and me, and so for Lost Fang, it really, I don't know if we did anything else, Oliver. Correct me if I'm wrong.
No, I think that's
all that stuff. There was a music video. There's a music video you worked on.
Oh yeah.
You did just watercolor paintings. So we did 3D elements, so the background would change. And we had another After Effects guy, motion guy, who took Oliver's paintings, and all the different panels of the background would shift and move. The sun was moving. So that was an awesome experience as well. So yeah, I mean, really collaborating, God, for 10, 15 years now, basically, over so it's off and on. So but Lost Fang is truly something that's just a collaboration that is just solely ours. So yeah, it's been a good run so far.
So did you actually, you said that you gave Oliver several choices. Did you have just sort of an elevator pitch for each one, or did you actually have 4 or 5 stories to choose from?
Yeah, it was more or less an elevator pitch. I had 5 stories. I had 2 out of the 5 kind of fleshed out as far as rough drafts. But I didn't want to go to Oliver with one idea because I was afraid he'd say no. Because whenever you're putting an artist in the corner, they're gonna run for the hills. Oliver's gonna effing block me, and I'll never talk to him again.
Even though I'm the one who asked you for an idea.
You did, but I was like, I got to give this guy options. I can't go to him. He's gonna kill me. So I was like, and knowing Oliver's art style and knowing what he likes, I definitely catered to that with Lost Fang. Like I knew vampire stuff. I mean, it's no big secret. Like Lost Fang is very Tim Burton-y in a fun, weird, quirky way, and that's something that Oliver and I both love, and that heavily influenced by. So I knew that was going to be a great suggestion out of the 5. I think 2 of them definitely he hated. I think there were 3 ideas he liked a lot. One of them was very ambitious. Lost Fang. Lost Fang was a perfect concept because it was very simple in its design. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. It wasn't too ambitious. The page count, I was fine if we cut it down, and I was fine if we added stuff. But getting it to that point and working with Chris Payne, because I've worked with Chris on a children's book as well that we had been tackling for the last 5 years. That book is kind of dead, but it still has some heartbeats to it. But learning that whole process with Chris helped me a lot with Oliver, because I knew what kind of page count we needed. I knew what publishers wanted. I knew what agents were going to say. And through that experience, it really helped. So I knew when I went to Oliver with the concept of Lost Fang, it wasn't the Lord of the Rings. It was like, it wasn't even, it was 32 pages, 15, 16 images, and that's it. And he was like, all right, this is doable.
Well, I think that's what was really attractive about it too, for me, is a challenge. And to your point, kind of about the whole thing we were talking about earlier, just about concepting and having ideas and doing the thumbnails and coming up with the name. It's like naming your band, who never actually gets any shows. That's the fun part, right? It's like, that's the fun part, is the ideating and coming up with all these grand ideas.
Oh yeah.
The finishing of a thing is so hard, and it's the most important part. And so going back to what I said earlier, looking for, like, I'm self-motivated, but I'll tear my own idea apart to the point where I'll sort of deflate it, because I'm just not confident in it. And so there's never a finish to it. And Tony, I knew, had projects with some other, creatives that were just sort of lingering and then coming back and showing signs of life, and then, kind of going quiet again. And granted, when you're working with Chris Payne, you work on Chris Payne's timeline. I would sort of cater to that as well. But I wanted a project. I knew Tony would finish stuff because he had made, his own short film, 2 creative kind of focused documentaries. He finishes things, and I can be a finisher, but I know I have to be, like I said, sort of accountable to somebody else to really pull through. I thought, I want to finish this book. I want to have a thing that's done, not just a cool idea that we've had, that we're kicking around character design and names. And no, let's finish this thing, because, I'm not the first to say it, but people will never finish it because it's, quote, not good enough. And I fall victim to that too. It's like, well, this isn't quite good enough. It's not good enough. And then it just sort of falls to the wayside. And I thought, I can't hold myself to a standard that is impossible to reach. I have to make the book I can make, and I'm gonna finish it. And that was sort of a big piece of this, was, let's get this book done. You've got these other projects. This one is going to be done. I'm promising you that. And I knew Tony would get it done with me. And that was a big motivator. It was like, look, this is going to exist one way or another, whether we're paying for one print that we're going to put on the shelf because nobody gives a hoot, or we find an audience and it blows up. Like, one way or another, this thing is getting done.
Yeah, they often say finished is better than perfect.
And that's a hard pill to swallow sometimes, though, because you don't want to deliver something that isn't, the best thing ever. But sometimes it's just, you just got to do the best you can do, but get the darn thing complete.
A picture book is like running a marathon. And it's one thing that, if you haven't done it, and obviously you're going to be doing it, finishing the art, because it's not something you can do as an all-nighter and turn it in or whatever. Right. You hear all these stories, speaking of editorial illustration, where you had a deadline the next day and you got this illustration in. A picture book's not like that. A picture book is a constant slog, and a lot of times the books are so different that each one takes the amount of time it takes to do. It's a difficult, even having done as many as I have, a lot of times it's hard to quantify how long a piece of art will take, because some have a ton of stuff in them, some have very little, and it's one of those things where it's a mixture of how much time you have to spend on it. I mean, and a lot of times, and you'll probably discover this too, like the first 2 or 3, like you'll spend over a week on them. And then the last one you do in the book, you spend like half a day on.
Right. You
because
just
you're
kind of
like, I
get,
just need to get it done.
and you've kind of figured some of it out. And well, that's the thing too. It's interesting because, you ideally you want every piece to just be the best piece ever, but
Oh, that's the
um,
goal for sure.
yeah, but then it's also the whole, like what I always wrestle with is I'm looking at ideas that maybe we have, or names even for the
Uh-huh.
book, or it's like, was this idea better than this idea? I don't know. And you're like, oh, I'm really torn. And then I have to remind myself that the audience is never going to know what the other idea was. They're only going
Yeah.
to see the one that they're never going to go, oh, he should have picked the other one. He got it wrong. Like they're never going to get that opportunity. They're only going to see the one and then
Yes.
judge it by that. So sometimes I got to let myself just relax and be like, just pick one, do the best you can, and then just kind of just get it done and you go on to the next one and try to make each one the best that it can be.
And sometimes when you're, and sometimes that's one of the things with doing the finished art. Sometimes I'll be working on a painting and then I'll look at the sketch again. I'll say, oh my gosh, I've totally lost the charm that this sketch had. And so then you go back in and you're like, how do I bring that back in?
Sure.
I mean,
Yeah.
there definitely is a struggle on every spread for sure.
Right.
It's not, I mean, sometimes it's like bricklaying, but sometimes there definitely is a existential crisis that happens.
Yeah. Well, right. And then I just think back to my own experience too, reading books with my kids and everything. Rarely do I go through we'll read a picture book or something, and I'll go, gosh, I really liked that. And that one illustration was really cool. I feel like I'm usually, if I'm drawn to the book, I'm focusing on the things I like. I don't go back through and go, well, it was on page 12. Like they really blew it there. You know what I mean? Like usually it's a more positive kind of thing. So I'm hoping that, people see the book as a whole and appreciate it as a complete idea and don't, pick each illustration apart like Tony and I might be.
Yeah, that's not something that, family. Actually, I think with a picture book, the most important thing, actually, on top of the art, but is being able to read it out loud comfortably. And you probably have done this, the cadence. I often, when I've illustrated a book, if I have to read it at an elementary school or something, some books you trip over the words a lot because everything's a mouthful, and some of them are easier to read. And so that's always a good test when you're doing a kid's book is, does it read out loud well?
Yeah, and Tony's still wordsmithing some things. We were just talking yesterday. It's like
Yes.
making those little, little edits, changing a word, getting rid of a word, just trying to really massage. And it's a kid's book. Everybody kind of goes, oh, no, anybody could do that. But it's like, no, you got to still give it the care. You got to still give it the care and the precision and the intent. And Tony, you're still working through some of the one-liners, aren't you?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, and talking about what you said before about reading things out loud, it's crucial. I mean, it's such a great tool to know, is this flowing right? Does this sing right? Or do I need all these words? Can I trim this? Can I add this? And I was geeking out, a couple months ago and I was telling Oliver about how I bought myself a typewriter.
Oh, wow.
As a writing exercise, I retyped Lost Fang on the typewriter. And the one thing I learned about that writing exercise is that it's just slower. And because it's slower, since you're not flying on a keyboard on an iPad or a computer, you actually have to think about all those words much, much more. And it slows the pace down. And it made me rethink a lot of things. And it was a wonderful writing exercise as far as my brain was concerned, because if
that's really interesting.
Yeah, it was because it slowed it down and I had to reread it and make sure it was typed, because my goal was to type Lost Fang out perfectly on a typewriter, which was really, really hard because I would make errors all the time because just the tactile feel of a typewriter is much harder than it is to just fly. There's no delete, there's no go back. So my goal is to do it perfectly, which was a great learning exercise. And I think I'll do it from here on out. And rewriting a children's book on a typewriter is a lot easier than rewriting a novel or a comic. Totally. But that exercise doesn't work for everyone. But it was a good way to force me to slow down and really think about the flow of the words, as they go. But to your point, yes, saying it out loud is different than reading it inside your head. Expressing a thought, verbally. Talking to Libby, my wife, about a sentence or a story, it just makes sense. It's like showing your short film to a classroom. you can feel the energy in the room. You know if it's good or bad. You know when it's like it's slowed down or if it needs to speed up. So no, I totally agree.
It's kind of like looking at something in print. You can look at it on screen all day. A package design for something and think you've got everything figured out, but it's not. So you print it out, fold it up, put it together, and then actually interact with it how it's going to eventually be in its final form. That you go, oh God, that feels weird. The flow of one panel to the other doesn't feel at all like I thought it was going to, or we didn't catch that mistake until now it's printed. And Tony and I were talking about doing that yesterday with Lost Fang, is even before sending it off to the printers and everything, doing a couple of print proofs ourselves.
That really helps a lot. There's always a misspelling, always.
Right. When I saw a YouTube video, a disaster story about a guy who did just a killer job on his campaign, on his book. I mean, he just killed it, did triple what he expected, did tens of thousands of dollars. And then there was a spelling error. And it meant no schools could carry it, no libraries would accept it, because we can't accept it with a spelling error. So he was offering people a sticker. It's like, if you don't want a new book, I'll send you a sticker of how the word should be, and you put it on there.
Oh my gosh.
He said almost everybody, the other offer that he had to offer was, I'll send you a new book. He said, almost everybody wanted a new book. He ended up in the hole. He lost all that money.
Oh my gosh.
Reprinting everything, Now, again, the expectation is the book will have a life after, but I thought, God, we've got to avoid that. We've got to avoid that.
Right.
I had a book once, and it was this was, I forget, years ago, and it was a self-published book, and the book looked really good. They actually hired an editor. The editor did a really good job, and the designer did a good job. But the problem was, and none of us caught it. I mean, I'm not a proofreader. There's a reason why I'm not. They had a misspelling on the cover, and they did a print run, and it was one of those typos that like your brain just didn't see it. That's why you should get a proofreader. And so they had to redo the whole print run.
Oh, it's such a bummer. It's such a bummer. Yeah, it happens all the time. It happens all the time with, in my design job and everything. Yeah.
Well, if you follow the newspaper, I mean, now they barely even have editors. There's always typos and stuff because you don't have that staff anymore looking at stuff. I have to say, I do like Grammarly. I use that on stuff because it catches a lot of stuff.
That's awesome.
Speaking of AI,
right?
Grammarly can be really handy when you're writing, because it will catch bad phrasing and stuff too, which is kind of interesting.
That's the thing too that Tony and I are even talking about, because with the print run, we're wrestling with the expense of getting a hard proof.
Yes.
And I run into that all the time. Clients don't want to pay for a proof anymore. They just look at a digital proof. And like we just said, it's not really the same. You're not looking at it as carefully. It's another PDF that comes through your email. It looks good, but you're not seeing color. You're not really checking it out. It just generally kind of looks like the PDF you emailed out before. So you just kind of go, yeah, that's fine. And then it comes back messed up. It's like that. So we're kind of wrestling with that because the hard proofs aren't cheap. But we're certainly going to do some ourselves. We'll print our own for sure a couple of times, but the hard proof from the printer is a little bit pricey.
Yeah. Christina said we had to do the hard proof, so
I think it's a good idea too. I think it's a good idea too.
It's all her fault.
Everything's my fault. Troy says my husband says I'm a bad influence on people, so I just should warn you. He's always
quite the opposite.
He's always warned me that instead of having an angel and devil, I have two devils that egg each other on.
Oh, that's funny. That's hilarious. Yeah, that's our type.
Exactly. But this is probably a good point to, I guess, end. We've been talking for a little over 45 minutes. So where can people find you?
Oh, geez, Oliver, you go first. I don't know what to say.
Well, you could find. I don't have a lot as far as a web presence. I do have a fairly active Instagram, but I have a website, oliverdraws.com. Pretty simple there. My Instagram is _Oliver_. Sadly, all the underscores are a bummer, but all the names are taken. So yeah, that Oliver. With a couple underscores in there. You can find me on Instagram, but you can get that link through my website, Oliver Draws, too. Not much else. We'll have a Lost Fang presence here. There's a Facebook for that, but there's not a website devoted to Lost Fang just yet, other than the old Kickstarter page. So anybody interested in that can look up Lost Fang on Google. I'm sure it'll pop right up on Kickstarter there. But that's all I've got.
Yeah, that's pretty much the same. Tony Moorman on all the social media platforms. But for the most part, I'll be focusing on on our trying to grow our Facebook page with Lost Fang. Lost Fang Facebook page will be our goal. And then we'll have, we're going to have a link for a little store for the book, once we get closer and closer to our release date, and I guess the number one thing I want to plug is our book Lost Fang is going to be released in October. And we're, that's going to be our big release, but we're hopefully going to have it wrapped up and we'll have it out there sooner than later is going to be our main goal. But, before I sign off, thanks again, Christina, for like all the advice and all the helpful hints and encouragement. We both of us probably would not be here today if we didn't have a nice sit down with you. What was that, like over a year and a half ago?
That was a while ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
It was. No, it was really helpful, Christine. And I think everybody knows your reputation locally and beyond as just a champion for all creatives of various levels. And I think that having you in our circle is only to our benefit. So my pleasure to come on and talk to you today. And we should do it again, not being recorded, and just grab coffee.
Oh, yeah, that would be great. Oh, and also you can see the documentaries Tony did. Is that on Vimeo? You can rent both Making It and CF Payne, American Illustrator.
You type those into the search bar, you'll find them right away, and it's pretty cheap. It's like a price of a cup of coffee.
Thank you both for being here.
Thank you, Christine.
Thanks for